Welcome to the Journey of an Aesthete podcast, a comprehensive examination of all things aesthetic, the arts, the humanities, and what it means to be human.
Hi. Welcome to Journey of an Aesthete.
Thanks.
This is Mitch Hampton. I'm the host of this show. And John, do you want me to say a couple of words in front?
Sure.
So our guest in this episode is a man named Jon Stepp. And Jon Stepp is, as I've said about some other people, everybody I've had on the show, is the ideal guest for this show. Because my show is inclusive. My show is about all the arts. And my show is about how people make things. And, of course, about people talking about how they make things and what the making of those things that I guess I would call representational means to them. You know, and it could be anything that the guest wants to provide. And so, Jon Stepp, I guess, how did I meet you? At Blue Mountain Pizza, right?
Yeah.
I think before we go ahead, we should give a shout out to Blue Mountain.
Yeah.
If you're in this part of North Carolina, what would you say this is? Western
Weaverville.
Western Weaverville. You must go to Blue Mountain Pizza. It's just the best food in town. Anywhere. Yep. It's the best staff. They make their ice cream from scratch. What else? Anything else I should know? They
make pretty much everything from scratch, and I think that it's got like a more of a family. It's family friendly, but it's also sort of like family operated,
right?
In terms of how close the staff is. So I think that's one of the unique things about it.
Absolutely. But that's kind of how I met you.
Yeah, that's how we met.
Because I like because I don't cook. So because I don't cook, I got to do what I can. You know? Right. And also I don't like bad food.
Yeah,
so
it's delicious food. That's a perk too.
How long have you been working there?
I'm working there about 7 years off and on. Basically, many times I would go for about 4 years straight every summer. For about 4 months of the summer, I would go and teach environmental education at a summer camp. And it also involved teaching dance and teaching drawing and painting. I was a drawing and painting coordinator there for some time. Summer camp was called Green River Preserve down in Brevard, North Carolina, which is beaming with life. Gorgeous place.
Huh.
Yeah. That's what I did for, the first 4 years I worked at Blue Mountain. I would go there, and then I'd go to the summer camp, and then I'd go back to Blue Mountain. Just flip-flop.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I mean, one of the reasons why, of course, I have it on your show is that you're a real artist.
Yeah.
You're a genuine artist. And your card says you do everything. What list the things that you do? It's quite impressive. You have it's more than just illustration and drawing, right?
Right. Yeah. So I do acrylic painting. I do oil painting.
Yeah.
I do. I've made several large format puppet like sculptures, I guess, and they're wearable as well. I do a lot of wood burnings. I do specifically ballpoint pen drawings for the most part, because that's sort of my forte. That's what I feel like I've mastered ballpoint pen, just because I've been working with that since I was a child. And then, of course, I've done digital media, and I use a Wacom tablet with that, which is a tablet that I can use basically like with the drawing device, and it would function the same way as a pen.
Okay.
And I also do some. Yeah, I think I mentioned some oils. Yeah, and do oil paintings, but my specific oil painting style is a separate style from my acrylic style. And I also have hand drawn T-shirts for a while.
Okay.
And then I
Is
went
that one of them?
This is one of them that I drew once.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and they are what they are. This is
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I usually in my show I do a linear chronology.
Yeah.
So I usually start from the beginning of a person's life.
Okay.
And I ask them like what made them start drawing, or in your case, doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I don't know where to start first. I mean, we I guess we'll have to talk about food some more, maybe. I don't know.
No. We don't have to talk about. Well, food. I've been in food has been my job.
Yeah.
For 17 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where that was the previous experience that I had to bring. So I tried at all stakes to try to avoid going into the restaurant industry, but what happens is, that's pretty much the only thing that'll hire me based off my experience.
Oh, interesting.
And so I do have some experience with screen printing, but my style of screen printing is very grassroots.
Okay.
And I've built many of the unit that I use. I've built much of by hand myself.
Wow.
And
well, we're going to talk about that because you mentioned this is the second time in 15 minutes you mentioned different styles.
Yeah.
Like you said, when I do this.
Yeah.
Medium, what is it, ballpoint?
Yeah, ballpoint.
You said it's different than acrylic or different?
Oh, yeah. So in approach and the way that it, I guess, it appears. Yeah.
So I guess that's something that's a part of who you are. You know that I'm going to do this here. It'll be different than that over there.
Right.
Is that driven by the materials as much as spiritual matters? Like, for example, your own internal, but is it also driven by what you might call materials or technologies? In other words, does acrylic have a certain property that ink doesn't have, and so on? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So acrylic has the quick drying and it's very forgiving properties.
Okay.
So I can paint over the paint and then manipulate it, and it can be ongoing, and it can be semi-permanent. Where ink, ballpoint pen. I've learned to accept the potential of it not coming out the way that I wanted. Now, I don't have to do that with acrylic. It can start one way, and then I can go ahead and paint over and reapproach it. With ballpoint pen, the marks that you make first are always going to dictate what happens to the piece. Finally. And that's true with acrylic too, and minutely, but what the fundamental difference I think between the two is that there's basically the forgiveness of each. One is very, it's set in stone, but it's also over time, various inks, it depends on which inks you use, ballpoint pen inks, can actually fade into different colors and stuff if they're exposed to light, for a particular time. Acrylic, they have a lot of light fast acrylics that will actually have sustain a certain amount of permanence that you don't get with ballpoint pen. So why do I do that? Why do I struggle? Why do I produce pieces with a medium that's not going to be as permanent and is permeable by light and all kinds of other environmental things? I'm not sure. I think that sort of struggle for me, sometimes the physical struggle and the physical outcome and the way that like the finiteness of a piece is important to me.
So you're saying that part of your one of the themes in your work, if I could put it that way, is the evanescence? Is that it, or is the temporary? Is the you said finite,
right? In other words, that it's produced in order it has a life and death, basically.
Yeah, it's produced to have a lifespan.
Yes.
So it's not
in some,
and that's part of the thing.
Yeah. And some things that I produce are produced to be infinite,
Right.
Or
Well,
at
that's
least
interesting.
as far as,
Now that decision of those two themes, that's not, I wouldn't think that's as much motivated by materials.
It's not. It's like
That's a more deeper
less-
thing than whether you're doing ink or acrylic, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess, but there's so much to talk about. Did you want to do the linear chronology and start from the beginning?
Yeah.
Because you bought this book.
Yeah.
I don't know why you bought this. I'm looking at the book here. It's called Scary Stories.
Yes.
It says, read these if you dare. It's by a guy named Alvin Schwartz. It's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And this looks like, you know what this looks like?
What?
One of those 70s kids books. Am I right? Is it?
Yeah.
It's one of those 70s Dell. Look, ages 8 and up. There it is.
Oh,
It's 1981. So
1981,
this
yeah.
is like a classic 70s. So I'm overjoyed by looking at this. So it's 81. And I guess it's horror stories for children.
Yes.
And the first story is called The Big Toe. And so you read this, I guess, when you were a child.
Yeah. When I was a kid.
But hold that thought. The thing
right.
that sticks out, of course, is this drawing
Right.
by a man named who's that?
Stephen Gamble.
Are you a fan?
I'm a fan of Stephen Gamble. Yeah.
So would you say that Stephen Gamble is the reason why one of the reasons you're an artist? Is that
Yeah.
would you go that far?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Did you want to talk about him first or later, or what did you want to? Whatever comes to your mind.
He just was this book. When I was a child, I was basically going over to my next door neighbor's house, and her parents, my friend's parents, would play horror movies every night.
Okay.
And then I would watch those, and then I would go directly to home and then go to bed. And then I would have terrible nightmares.
What kind of horror movies? Because I
for the most, all kinds.
Oh, wow.
Slasher.
That's interesting.
Monster horror.
What are your favorite slashers? Do you like Slumber Party Massacre?
No,
You don't like Slumber
Well,
Party?
I don't know. I haven't seen that one.
Really?
Yeah, I like some of my current favorite horror movies have. I didn't see then, but I would say Dead Alive.
Dead Alive's a good one.
Yeah, Dead Alive's pretty good by Peter Jackson.
Yeah, before he went into the rain or into the.
It's like his maybe third movie.
So you must like Heavenly Creatures too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You like that period of Peter Jackson.
Oh yeah. I do.
That's interesting. So, but when you say slashers, there's so many kinds.
I know.
It's like
that's true. Halloween.
The classic one. Yes.
Yeah. Halloween's good. Friday the 13th. These are the ones that I grew up watching, and then, but I'm not interested particularly in slasher. I'm interested particularly in horror films at this time.
Right.
And then so all kinds. It runs the gamut.
Right.
Obviously, Dead Alive is not necessarily a slasher. It's more of a horror gore comedy.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's using.
Yeah,
it's using visual gags in a very interesting way, actually.
Yeah. So, but moving forward with my lifespan,
Scary Stories. So you're having nightmares. Basically.
I'm having nightmares, and then I'm like,
okay.
Then I basically become drawn to the macabre. I become drawn to a physical representation of death, like a tangible idea of death as a child. Okay. And I think a lot of children go through these sorts of thoughts, in my opinion.
So is that like Edgar Allan Poe?
Edgar Allan Poe,
Lovecraft?
all sorts of, yeah. I have an entire bookshelf of horror
you
books.
do?
Yeah. And ghosts,
that's fantastic.
Stories and things like that. And specifically from Richmond, Virginia, where I'm originally from, I have Ghosts of Richmond is a series. Interesting. Spans many volumes, but I digress again. Basically, Stephen Gamble, the way that his drawing style sort of like struck a chord in me, and it's one of the major reasons I really started getting into art.
That's interesting. I mean, they're beautiful. I'm looking at these. What is this? It's like a dress hanging from a hanger without a.
Yeah.
It's a white satin evening gown. Is it supposed to be a ghost wearing it? Or?
Yeah, I think so. And this one's pretty good. I think my favorite drawing in here, I think this is probably my favorite.
Oh, wow.
And
it's like some kind of a ghoul. I guess the audience is at a disadvantage because they're not seeing these while we're looking at them. But
that's true.
But on the other hand, we could talk about it in sort of.
Yeah,
it's all black and white. It's all what is
Yeah.
What is he doing? What is the medium there? Is it?
I believe it appears to me that he uses charcoal and likely some water.
Okay.
And in places where you see it's dark and sort of like bleeds out like that. What I believe that he can do, you can take charcoal powder.
Yeah.
And you can literally shave it onto a piece of paper and then drip water on it. And what will happen is an effect that sort of like allows the charcoal to bleed out like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's sort of like wiriness, drippy, bleedy, smudgy kind of appeal is what sort of like makes me, it makes me feel like it makes me feel fear in small ways, you know? It becomes more tangible.
Uh-huh.
And so that's kind of like the origins of what I originally became interested in art about.
Well, I got to tell you a personal story that relates to this. I'm not a horror fan per se, but there are things in horror I like.
Yeah.
So I love David Cronenberg films, and he's part of that. I like some early George Romero. Yeah. Especially Martin.
Oh, yeah.
And Martin's an extraordinary film. And, of course, the Dead series, especially Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I wrote a piece of music in 1993 called Night Creatures.
Oh, yeah?
That was inspired by horror cinema, believe it or not. It's
Cool.
like a classical piece, and it's got movements in it. And it's called Night Creatures, the whole thing. And actually, the last movement is called Night Shift. And the first movement is called Children of the Night, which is taken from Dracula. It was taken from Bram Stoker,
Right.
Children of the Night. So I wrote this piece of music. So clearly, even though I don't think I would consider myself a fan, I was influenced by it at least some degree.
Yeah.
That world.
Yeah.
Although I'm not an expert on it. You might be more expert on it.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, I think that that there's basically, as humans, we have the unique opportunity to be able to analyze our emotions.
Sure.
And I think that I think that there needs to be attention paid to the gamut of our emotions. And I'm privy, or at least when I was a child, to sort of pet that dark animal in me, you know? And I think that it was because it represented the unknown to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really a starting point for all of my pieces. This is unknown. What I can do is I can play out in my head what it will happen. But what happens isn't what you think it's going to happen. It never.
Also, you're basically talking about philosophy, right? Basically, right? You're talking about the fact that we don't really know the future.
Right.
So what you're saying is that you want to encounter the future, but you want to encounter it without a blueprint? Is that it? Or without a plan? Or maybe you want to encounter it without trying to control it? Or do you want to try to control it or master it? Or both? Or
So, yeah. So my approach, and I want to encounter it with a plan,
right.
But be okay and humbled by the fact that it is out of my control.
Yeah. And
that's basically, every single thing. Otherwise, I can be too critical. I'm trying to avoid being critical because my own self-criticism is what's going to feed my procrastination. So it's best for me to just spend 5 minutes doing what I want to do, and whatever happens after that
Right.
is what happens. And it's out of my hands. It's unknown. I try to approach much of my art by having it, what I call, spill out of me. I try to approach it without regard to the final product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah, and more of a subconscious analysis.
Yeah,
is what I do when I do my super serious pieces.
When you say something super serious, what does that entail? Like large? Does it have to do with size or?
No, it doesn't have much. Well, it doesn't have much to do with size. It does have to do with time spent.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the majority of my.
What I want to know is, how did you get from being a kid into scary stories to teaching art here in Asheville? And I guess we want to pick up the biographical.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go back there.
Line how one thing develops from another thing.
Right. So basically, I was from that moment starting to draw creepy little things. Doodling in class, that sort of thing. and then next thing you know, you have art teachers like Miss Farrell, when I was in elementary school and things like that essentially encourage you.
Oh, wow.
To continue and encourage you to keep doing art. And then next thing you know, I had other kids paying me money for art.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So you're already making a living as a little kid.
Yeah, pretty much, like a buck or whatever
really?
A piece. Yeah.
I guess because you were good and they responded to what kind of things were you drawing for?
Well, oftentimes
was it commission, like I want a picture of this, or was it out of your own heart, or was it both?
It was essentially commission based, and I want this, I want that, and then I would draw it. A lot of times, boys would be the ones who would pay me, and other boys in the school, and a lot of times they just wanted muscular torsos and things like that.
Okay.
For some reason, yeah, I don't know. So that was pretty. But anyway,
so you had to draw that for them.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think it was this sort of appeal of the sort of He-Man. Back in the 80s when I was growing up, it was a big thing.
So none of these boys were too young to want a picture of a girl. Is that it, or?
I did do some nudes, you could say. But that was later. They weren't necessarily pornographic until maybe middle school.
Okay.
And
then you were drawing erotic type pictures in middle school, or?
Sometimes, yeah, but it's all like, again, that's exploration of your inner. I
mean, it's interesting that what's remarkable to me is that that you're actually doing that that's incredible. You're already you're already in a way, you're an artist. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
think about it. You're
yeah. Right? I mean, it really is like, I wasn't as interested in having lasting relationships when I was younger, as I was seeking out or essentially narrowing down what I want out of a relationship, just picking and choosing. And so that sort of like self-analysis was omnipresent, or whatever with me at all times. And I think that, a lot of people have different ways of dealing with that, and I dealt with it by trying to produce those emotions and things into a more tangible form.
Yeah. We're gonna take a break for station identification, and I want to thank Anchor.fm for making this possible. And if you want to explore that, you can contact them and make your own vision come to life. And we will be back. Everybody needs an anchor in life. You, me, just everybody. Anchor made this whole show possible. I'm immensely grateful to them. You too can use Anchor to make your own shows and create your own vision. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thank you. Okay, John. So took a break for the station identification, as I used to say. And so you were going to talk more about biography. So you're doing these drawings for classmates, I guess, right, in school.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And in middle school, you were doing more of a provocative nature. You were doing...
Well, yeah, I mean, it became more prevalent, but it wasn't the central theme.
Right.
It was just what people wanted.
Yeah.
You know, I feel that, well, in middle school, and yeah, I think middle school is where I started to begin painting.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is that a big change from what you were doing? Painting is like an exploration.
Yeah. Painting. Yeah, painting. Well, for the most part, had to do with more of trying to hone my craft, rather than at that time, rather than trying to produce a certain kind of
Result?
Yeah, result.
Well, here's the thing. I want to ask you about this because I can't draw for anything at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like a mentally challenged kind of really not, like basically I draw, I'm going to be 52 in a couple of weeks for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And I draw like a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And like stick figures with no perspective.
Right.
How do you explain someone like yourself? You're very much the opposite. You're someone that seemed to know. Mm-hmm. Like, I think shortly after you were born, you actually saw things in environment, in space. Could you describe what that is that you're able to do? How would you describe that? Is it just the ability to see your environment or know it intuitively and render that in a physical form? What do you attribute that to? Is it just?
I think I attribute it to initially the ability to recognize the form, that recognize that the true outline of an object, rather than spending time just getting a generalization down on paper. Oh. What was more important to me was the aesthetics of the line, of the outline of an object.
And you were able to duplicate that with your hand. Right? Yeah. And you mentioned before that has something to do with light and shadow. Is that the real crux of it? Would you say?
Yeah, I would say that since it is known that we are living in a 3-dimensional world, that we see in 2 dimensions.
Huh.
If we lived in a 4-dimensional world, we'd see in 3 dimensions.
Okay.
But since we exist in this world and we see in 2 dimensions, all that we have is an object's relationship to other objects. Okay. In size, and where those objects are with light.
Okay.
And that was something that became apparent to me early on, and I think it was just an inherent quality. Visual art was my inherent art.
Okay.
Just like,
so you found your medium.
Yeah. Pretty quick. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, having dexterous hands and having an appeal, having the appeal of what it, what that did for me is, making things, being able to create tangible things was important to me, so.
And so now you're painting.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens in your life when you start painting?
Well, what happens
What
with
changes
paint is now we're starting to get into more of a color, basically color comparison and things like that, and composition. I'm starting to consider more compositionally what things are, and the painting. My first sort of turn on to that was Francis Bacon, not the writer, but the painter.
They're both pretty good.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's interesting. You're mentioning both.
Yeah.
So you'll be excited when I tell you I went to his show.
Francis Bacon,
the one that was in the '90s, real big.
Oh
one.
yeah.
I think it was at Whitney or.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I don't know. I don't know. I did see a documentary on him.
Yeah.
And I've read books on him.
So you're inspired by him.
Yeah. And I think it's all
It's
rooted
the Gothic.
Yep. And it's all
because he comes out of the
morose, yeah. Like this sort of thing. This sort of like ability to invigorate fear in people, to move, to be moved by that.
Yeah.
In that
it's one of the primary emotions. Right?
Yeah.
Certainly. We're talking at a time now where there's so much impulse to censor.
Right.
I don't know if you're as angry as I am about that. And a lot of it centers around the subject of horror, or horrible subjects.
Yeah.
Or horrific subjects, or Gothic
That's
subjects. There's basically two movies. Right? There was a movie that was prevented from being released. Craig Zobel's movie about it. It's because it involved shooting.
Oh yeah.
And the film was literally prevented from release. Like the studio said, we can't release this. Just because people were shooting people in life.
Right.
People have always shot people in life. They never pulled a movie. In other words, even though the movie has I want to understand nothing plot-wise in common with school shooting.
Yeah.
That's really ultra sensitive. That's really, so I have my opinion about that. Clearly, I'm on one side of that.
Right.
Really, partly because for selfish reasons, because I wanted to see Craig Zobel's film.
Right.
Because I happen to like him as a director. I can't see this guy's film because some studio or whatever. It's just crazy. And then, of course, there's everything that comes out now is the subject of immense controversy.
Right.
And of course, the reason for the controversy is kind of the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
Is representation of death.
Right.
And
yeah,
representation of a part of human nature that we don't like, and that causes us much suffering and causes much pain.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that? It's kind of interesting, but.
Yeah, I do have some thoughts about
thoughts about why now that's kind of not fashionable anymore, or why that's if that's the word, or why now there's an impulse to try to destroy that. And
well,
control it.
For one thing, we're living in this new world where essentially there are mass shootings. It seems like maybe twice a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's different.
It's pretty bizarre. And that's the state of things right now.
Yeah.
Now, to hide people from that, to shelter them from knowing about that, to shelter them from experiencing what that may be like, I do not think is healthy. I don't think it's okay to disregard the fact that there are wars going on right now.
Right.
I don't think that it's healthy to hide the true nature of what goes on from people. I don't think that that's right.
Yeah.
Honestly. And I think that what's going to happen when you do stuff like that is it actually could have a counter effect of, well, what does this look like? Maybe I should see what this looks like. Maybe I should experience what this looks like. Things like that. It could get that way, when you shelter people from the truth, when you shelter people from the visualization of horror, then what happens is they're going to look they're going to look inward, and wonder why they feel a certain way, or wonder why they're not allowed to see something.
Yeah.
And then,
I thought I would just throw that out there because it's related kind of to what we're
yeah,
one of the things we're talking about.
that's true.
Without going too far into it, because that would be like another show in a way. But not sure. So you're seeing Francis Bacon, and so you see his painting, and you're saying, I want to do that, or something like that.
Yeah.
You're saying,
yeah, it's something about the animalistic qualities and portrayal in his paintings, as well as the what appears to me to be a struggle oftentimes in his paintings.
Yeah.
That he's confronting his paintings like he's confronting himself. And I think that sort of like strikes the same chord in me that I feel. So when I looked at his paintings, and you can look at I love Dali, for instance. You look at Dali, and and because I feel like I'm more of a surreal artist as well. I'm drawn to Dali, and of course, that's like many people's first real sort of like interest in visual art. It comes from Dali. Well, Dali had struggled, and Dali had imagery that to him represented his struggles. But I don't think that it comes off as raw as Francis Bacon makes it come off. Because Francis Bacon actually uses the paint to tell the struggle. In other words, his strokes, his brushwork, his lack of his broken down image, his lack of image, the empty space, the void, the darkness. These things are, I think, what really truly can, like, for me, express the sort of horror and embarrassment and dark, basically darker spectrum emotions that I think we all have.
Sure.
So
in that sense, your work's kind of traditional. Yeah. Or classical, right?
Yeah.
Even though you're a modern person, right? Because the classical people in the artistic canon were interested in these things, and always going back to them.
Right.
These older themes.
That's true.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Interesting thing to think about. So Bacon.
Yeah.
And so your work changes as a result, right?
Yeah. I started to use more color to express, what I wanted to. And then I started working with the paint, and I paint fairly realistically now. Then I was fooling around with strokes and fooling around with, colors behind colors.
When you say realistically, what do you mean? Do you mean Renaissance linear perspective being part of it, or?
No, not necessarily any sort of like geometric stance, but more using a
subject matter,
realistic imagery. It's really hard to describe.
Realistic, like Lucian Freud realistic? I don't know. I thought of Lucian Freud because we talked about Francis Bacon.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I don't want to go too far onto Freud, but he, I think, no, that's never mind. We're talking about two different Freuds. I was about to tell you about
not Sigmund
Freud. Yeah, no,
although they're related, actually. I think. But
Lucian Freud,
the painter who paints nudes and
right. Yeah, not necessarily scenes, not realistic scenes. I don't do like Chuck Close stuff. I don't do things like that. But I use realistic imagery within a surrealistic environment.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because and what that imagery means to me is what's the most interesting part for me.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I think that to be able to show people what I want, is harder for me to do than it is for Bacon to do.
Yeah.
Because anyway, that sort of like spurred me into continuing to do art in high school, and then continuing and going ahead and deciding to do art in college.
Mm-hmm.
And
what college was that?
That was VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. Yeah, they have a pretty good art program.
Did you like being there?
Yeah, I did. It's
who was a teacher there that really you would have to name now if you wanted to, that you said that person was
there was a teacher named I think he was a Scottish guy. His name was James. Oh man, I can't even. It escapes me right now. I haven't had much sleep last night.
Yeah,
James.
I wouldn't know because I don't know the department.
Yeah, he's a painter.
Well, James, whomever you're
Miller.
James Miller.
James Miller.
You have something to do with Jon Stepp.
That's true.
Sitting here today. But,
hilariously enough, if he were standing here right now, and you see how the name escapes me, he would say that's because you didn't eat any steak this morning.
Okay.
He believed that you needed to eat protein in order to paint. You have to eat meat before you paint.
People have lots of beliefs about diet. And I can guess about half of the people listening to this show might be ethical vegans. It might be horrified to hear that and think that eating a cow is the equivalent of killing a child or maybe killing an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And about the other half of people are not ethical vegans, but maybe want to be and feel guilty.
Yeah.
And then the other half, this is not mathematical. Half, third, whatever. Another percentage of my listeners might actually be chefs that specialize in meat or cow. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is a whole gamut, just like with the thing about movies censorship.
Of course.
Some people want to ban something, other people don't want to ban it, other people like it. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. So you have a teacher telling you how to eat or telling you got to eat this or that.
Yeah. And he with complete disregard to people's diet. That's what he would tell people to do. They would say, well, I'm vegetarian. And he would say, you need protein. You need protein if you want to paint. Yeah. And then he taught me how to set up my palette by color.
Yeah.
And to maintain that palette and keep those colors separate.
That's really interesting.
In their own way.
So you trained him that. He was training your ability to.
Yeah.
You said something to me once that still mystifies me. You said that there actually aren't really discrete things in the world, right? Didn't you were the one that told me that? And you said so when you said the reason why you're able to paint as well as you do, draw, is because you see what's really there, which is light and shadow. Mm-hmm. Is that really what's there? What does that mean exactly? My paraphrasing, you said that. So what does it mean when you see something, you see light and shadow?
Right. So depending on where your light source comes from is what dictates the light and shadow in the form of an object.
Yeah.
So when you're in a room or even if you're outside, the way that the light bounces is also what plays the role on taking the form and color of an object and and everything. Okay. So the light actually, even in shadow, can bounce and become something else.
Okay.
And that sort of thing is what, to me, what makes something appear three-dimensional.
Okay. So it's a question of light.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the light source. Yep. That's exactly right.
I have not started Betty. Do you know the Betty Edwards book?
No.
Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the name of that?
About that.
Well, that was like a stereotext. I have not even done that yet. One of these days, I'm going to have to set aside my fear of phobia of my own inability to draw and try to do that and tackle that as a textbook. It's one of the, I don't know, many things I'm doing.
Well, you're
just throwing that out there.
Well, yeah. I mean,
you teach, right? So I'm sure, but I don't think you've ever had a student as ignorant as me. I think I might be the worst. I don't know. I mean, you can talk about your teaching, but what do you do when you have a real tough case, someone that can't see and their arm looks like a leg and they can't see make a head, draw a nose and a head? How do you have to?
I try to use tactics such as comparing basically using a point in the piece as a point of reference that would dictate what happens to the rest of the piece. So let's say that I'm having them draw a still life and it has an apple. Well, I'll say, draw this apple first. Okay. Now look at the apple and then look at this, bed sheet.
Okay.
Now, basically, you take that point of reference, the apple, and then that would sort of like help. I think it helps people kind of grasp the size of things, and then from there we'll talk about where the light is and what happens within it. But I usually do that, and then I also will do things like do all the dark parts first. Okay,
so you separate it.
Yeah, separate it.
So that's kind of like
down.
So you're saying that's a successful way to teach in a way.
It's been helpful. It's been helpful. Yeah. I'm not. Some people. My major goal with my classes is to get people to make something for themselves, to build something that they can put into the world that never was there.
So that's like my show. That's remember I said it's the first thing I said.
Yeah.
At the beginning of my show. My show is about people making stuff. So there you have it.
Yeah.
That's perfect. So what do you teach now? What institutions?
Oh yeah. I teach a pretty lax drawing class. Actually I'm spinning it towards art class at the library. And it's a pretty random days of the month. You kind of have to look in the Mountain News, Mountain Express or whatever at the end. Yeah. You'll see under art, oftentimes you'll see when my classes are. Okay. But, it's a free class for adults. And, generally I have, I'll go ahead and up front talk about various approaches and techniques. Okay. Then from there, I'll have them do activities that sort of correlate or they respond to those techniques and approaches. Okay. And then just so that they can even just grasp something about what I'm talking about, what's appealing to people, what is appealing to the audience of your piece. In a visual way, there's repetition. Okay. In visual way, there's composition, and how you go about doing that, or juxtaposition can be interesting. But basically, the ultimate goal, if you really want to, if you want to be able to keep people looking and interested, your goal is to capture that audience and try and make it as, in a way, a sort of like audience cage where they're stuck there. I believe. Yeah. I don't know. That's just like, but you don't have to make art do that. It doesn't have to be something that you must do. It's just, if you want people to be interested in what you do, you have to captivate them. Yeah, sure. Some way or another. And the way that you can do that, one easy way is repetition. Yeah. Repeat an image within a surface, and all of a sudden they're stuck between these points, and they can and they're just bouncing off of these points. And what happens in between those points is where they're caught.
Right. And that's how you teach, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
So it sounds like you have your own system. Now, is this similar? I know you were doing a project this year with little kids. Was that a different? So talk a little bit about that, because that involved what, paper mache or?
Yeah, that was.
Is that something
cardboard.
you didn't want to talk about, or no? I mean, because you have so much going on, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Was that for the library, Pack Library? Or
that was for Pack Memorial Library, and that's where I teach.
And that's a commission.
Yeah, and that was on commission, and it was for an event called the Star Party.
Okay, so it's sci-fi theme.
Western North Carolina Star Party. It was for a photo booth. So basically, I produced these cardboard props that were wearable, like a giant space helmet. And there was a comet that you could wear. Okay. And there was a star helmet that you could wear. And there was basically an ET. It was ET mask. And they were all just raw, painted white. Raw. And then I had my students paint those however way they wanted. Yeah. And they'd be two adults, spending time painting each prop. Yeah. And then the end result is they have something to wear. Yeah. Or somebody would. Yeah. Did people wear them? Yeah. Kids wore them. Adults wore them. And I also made the background. Oh, wow. Which is, it was a space background that I made with a black sheet and acrylic paint on my deck. I just laid it out and just painted space on my deck. What I thought space looked like. Okay. So lots of dots, different colored dots for stars, beams of light, nebulas, things like that, galaxies, swirly galaxy things, planets. And that was the back. I remember one time I was in a museum looking at Claude Monet. Mm-hmm. I think one of his lily paintings. Okay. And there were some really deeply unintelligent people around me, unfortunately. Okay. And this is the kind of what I'm talking about. They were objecting to the paintings because it was not botanically correct. Because it wasn't literal botany. Because, it didn't look like an actual water lily. And I think they were like really into, they were into flowers or something. And they probably were highly intelligent, I must say. Although they get no credit from me whatsoever because they don't get this called, basically their problem is that it's just, they just saw a bunch of color and they said, well, I think a lily would really be like this, or like almost like taking points off. Yeah. But that's a lot of that. What I mean is that's right. That's the thing in our culture is like, right. Yeah. Like, that's insane. Overanalyzation or just a sort of like, you missed the point entirely. Yeah, it made me think about that because you were drawing space. Yeah. And I was thinking of what if some uptight astronomer would not be able to appreciate what you did because they're looking for a particular Milky Way or a particular constellation. Right. How much of that, shall we say, lack, I don't know, it's actually not an intelligence question, it's an education question. Right. Lack of education or lack of understanding of aesthetics do you encounter in your life, would you say? Oh, it certainly happens. I mean, for me, it seems like people want the world. Some people want the world to be simple and understandable. Mm-hmm. And then there are people who want a new world that does not exist. That's also understandable. They both understand, just one is yet to be and one is what it is. And then there's, that's it. you have to live, damn it.
Yeah, you have to live life.
Yeah, you do. You have to live life. The only way that you're going to be able to truly produce your art fully is by living first, I believe.
Yeah.
This is just a belief that I have. I think that you have to have experiences in order to take those experiences and compose them into a piece.
Yep.
And there's just no other way to do it. And so, like, not only should you do art as often as possible, your art, whatever it may be, but you should also take time to live, to have experiences, to have good experiences, bad experiences, to have an ever-changing, complex life, because otherwise you're not going to have as meaningful of a experience with your piece, I think. And so, you know, some of the things that I do for that is I'll go out into the woods and with a bottle of wine and a book of poetry and just read out loud sometimes. And that's helpful for me. And
what poem?
I'm reading this book called Happily, and I can't remember the author of the poem, but it's a newer poem. It's called Happily. Yeah. And that's sort of like, I can open it to any part and it will speak to me. It'll it's a book. So, but anyway, it just sort of like it'll correlate and inspire me to. Yes,
there she is, Lynn Hedgenian.
Hedgenian, yeah. Hedgenian, yeah.
That's who you're reading.
Yes.
So you would recommend her work to the audience? Oh
yeah, absolutely. Lynn
Hedgenian, Happily. Get that book. Get it through Audible.
Yeah.
Audible will have it. Audible.com. And you read that in the woods?
Yes. I read that in the woods. And it's usually with some wine.
Yeah.
And I just experience and absorb my surroundings. And I listen to myself. My own voice bouncing off the inside of my own skull. And not, this recorded voice doesn't sound like the voice I hear, you know, and it's bizarre to me sometimes.
You wouldn't want to read Happily on the air now, would you? Do you have a copy of it?
I don't have it. I can read it on the air now, but I don't have a copy on me.
Okay.
It's either in the car or it's on my bookshelf. Yeah.
Do you have anything in the car you can read or no? You bought this book, this black book, it's got some things in it.
Oh, the scary stories. Oh yeah, my sketchbook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want your impressions of this Lou Beach.
Okay.
This is one of my favorite album covers ever.
Okay.
And it's this it's this mermaid. It's from Liquid Love is the name of the album.
All right.
It's from the 70s. It's by Lou Beach. It's this Freddie Hubbard album, and Santa Fu Al Hall Jr. was on this album, and I interviewed him very recently. But this is quite a cover.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about this mermaid and this cover?
Yeah. So
what is it this artist doing? It's considered outrageous, right? People see this now. What freaks people out when they see this kind of cover? Or not freak out? Why does that seem so?
Well,
extreme?
I don't know if people would. I don't know if people would freak out per se, but I think that the association with women and fish is something that that sort of juxtaposition may be, odd for people.
Oh.
I think
that's actually not what it is. I mean, a lot of it for people is the colors.
Oh yeah,
the fact that it's a very much of its period, right? It's very much.
That's true.
It's very much of the 70s. I think people look at that more than say the content, but it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely so we're looking at a collage.
It's a collage, yeah. So it's surrealist.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah,
it's
we're
totally
looking at a surrealist collage.
Yeah.
Of images taken during the 70s, and so taken with cameras during the 70s.
Oh, interesting.
And maybe even video images.
Huh.
And then these images are used in a collage way to portray what appears to be a mermaid.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what to me is like the more fascinating part of that image is the sort of like I guess it's an anemone around her head.
Oh yeah,
like a sort of halo.
That's right. It's a halo, and it's like it looks like a hat or and it's a conch shell. Is that a shell?
Yeah, what is some kind of shell? That's
yeah.
I don't know that it's a conch, but it's some kind of
Well, it's very mythical, right? It's a mythical image, and
it's like what.
I mean, Lou Beach is still working. He has a website. Clearly, he's done a lot of album covers. And
oh yeah,
so that would fall. This one would fall under the category of commercial illustration, right?
That's true. Yeah,
but isn't that kind of a bogus label? Like, can't you have something in commercial illustrations as good as uncommercial or fine art illustration? Isn't that just a label? Or what? I know you have some opinions on that, or feelings about.
Yeah, there's commercial art versus personal art is different for everyone. You know, for me, sometimes having somebody commission you to do to have a particular approach to a piece is may not exactly be how you want to go about producing art. It may not be a start that you are as interested in.
Yeah.
You know, so one of the things that is also something that, akin to commercial art is basically this idea of, is it going to be appealing to the masses? The
masses, or the majority.
Yes. Is it going to be appealing to the demographic that I'm trying to appeal to?
Are there times when you have to think about that? Like when there's a commission?
I believe so, yes. There are times when basically, if I'm making art for children, I have to consider color. I have to consider content. I have to try and be a little bit more reserved in my approach, and I have to be able to sort of feel what the viewer, what the experience that I want the viewer to feel, rather than what the experience that I would feel.
Okay.
I don't even know. It's
like, hard thing to do.
It's hard. Yeah, it is.
That raises the philosophic question. I always said in my first episode of this show that everything is philosophical.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are getting philosophical. Like, that's
cool.
Well, that raises the question over what the difference is, if any. Now, there are people, and that depends on the person, because there are people for whom there's not much difference.
Right.
Like I can guess. I'll make my bet, my bottom dollar, that there are people in this world who come very close to picking that up in other people. In other words, there's an accuracy in which they read other people's kind of emotions and their.
Yeah.
I don't say total accuracy, but I say close enough so that it's significant.
Yeah.
And then there are other people who could be quite clueless about them and not get that at all. And then there's all kinds of things in between.
Right.
And so that's it. I think it's when you're an artist, you really don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to know that.
It's impossible to know.
Well, but there are those people that can sort of do it, right? Like I said, a certain amount of the population.
Yeah.
Do you think when you make something, this is going to communicate almost like it's a close match, or like it's
right?
There surely must be something like that in the universe,
right?
For there to be what I would call universally beloved works of art.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, universally beloved and universalizable belovedness.
Yeah.
Like a Shakespeare or a Dickens, that kind of thing. Or
right.
Even some of the things, some of the horror films we've talked about, horror things, those are close to universal. They have a huge, I mean, there are things that a lot of people got something out of. And in other words, I have
like the Birth of Venus, the Botticelli is another one.
Oh, yeah, that's an incredible painting. Yeah, there were paintings that are Mona Lisa, of course. They're blockbusters, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But within that blockbusters, there's some blockbusters that aren't really worth that much.
Right.
They're just famous and beloved, but they're not as good as some other things are.
Right.
But they just tap into sort of that universal psyche.
Yeah.
And then there are other blockbusters that rise above merely having mass appeal, that they're a little bit deeper and a higher level. And there's that difference too. So it's complicated, right? So it's like, it's very complicated. But you're talking about making something, I guess, for commission or not yet? Like what?
Yeah. So I guess that there's a sort of like, when you're on commission, basically you have to be able to read the
emotions. Yeah.
What they want out of it. Not necessarily what you want out of it. And I've painted a beer label once, and I spent a great deal of time, and there was a woman in the center of it, and she had a sort of mischievous face. And I thought that was pretty cool. I liked the mischievous face. I get a certain amount of, freedom with my commissions, so I sort of went into it, and I sort of became sort of wrapped up into the emotion of the woman in the painting, because to me, it was not what you expected. That was what was cool about it to me. And a lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people, and I think it was because it's not what you expect. The expectations of portrayed beauty is that I think for a lot of people that it's sort of like it has to be pleasant. There has to be a pleasant emotional response to the piece, to beauty.
As opposed to mischief? Is that
as opposed to mischief? As opposed to, a more point of tension.
Okay.
But I was more interested in creating a point of tension to capture the audience, to harken back to what I'm trying to explain earlier.
Yeah.
And
which was
to sort of capture, you want to be able to have a point in your piece that, essentially props up some interest that keeps your people interested in it. And since it's a label, I thought that would be pretty cool to have something that's sort of bizarre about it.
Yeah.
And that would keep people in there. Well, what had happened was, because it was too odd for my commissioners, it was eliminated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Out of the center of the piece. And, I had been paid. And so essentially for me, it was in their hands. I had been paid. I had the original work of art.
Wow.
And
do you have it with you today?
I don't have it with me today. It's a painting.
Okay.
I painted a beer label. Okay.
I thought maybe you had a copy of reproduction of it.
No, I don't. No, I don't have it with me today. But you can go through that if you want to. But basically for me, when I'm doing this commercial type of stuff, ultimately I'm doing it for the money.
Yeah.
And that for me, it can be a sort of like disheartening situation. I would be totally pissed off if somebody took one of my personal pieces and changed them in say a gallery setting, because it would just drive me up the wall. And I think that that's completely inappropriate. But since I had been paid, it was out of my hands. And since it's out of my hands, it's out of my body, it's out of my system. And that kind of thing is the disheartening portion of commercial art for me. Personal art is more about me than my commercial art. So that's the difference for me.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. That's a significant difference, though, right?
Yeah. It's a big difference for me.
How does that motivate you in terms of your decision making? That difference, or what do you? So the more I can explore the internal workings of myself in my piece, the more I can understand myself, and the closer I get to my subconscious, the better for me. Okay.
The commercial art, I still has elements of who I am in them, and something that but I have to sort of detach myself from that, especially when it comes to money. Yeah. I don't really sell a lot of pieces. I haven't sold any of my personal pieces at all. I'll give them away to friends and family where I can keep them nice and close. That way I know where they are, and they're not too far away. They're still my little creations that are always around, that I can look at and use as a reference point to understand how I felt at the time. Well, you like this drawing here?
I like everything in this book.
Yeah.
That's remarkable, the detail.
Yeah, thanks. That's something that I'm like really, it's really important for me is sort of.
See, this is why I mentioned Lou Beach.
Yeah.
Look up at Lou Beach's website. It's a real parallel. It's an uncanny parallel. If you
Yeah.
enter his,
Oh yeah. Yeah. This stuff is this is more, that was a piece that was actually commissioned that I was just creating an idea. It was a demonic vagina. Somebody wanted me to make them a sculpture of a demonic vagina. And so I drew out the sort of plans for that, and to sort of like, I don't know, have an approach to that I could then take and make into a.
So that was for hire.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's not something that I was particularly,
What have you ever hired for anything that you would say is the opposite of Gothic? Like somebody wanted something very angelic.
Yeah.
Have you had jobs like that? Or
yes, I've had album. Somebody wanted me to make 50 different album covers for their one album.
They did?
Yeah.
That's a lot of album covers.
Yeah, wow. and I did.
Wow.
I made 50 different hand-drawn albums.
Wow.
Each album cover was different. And all of those were quite pleasant and, a little trippy. I got elements of like psychedelia in my pieces.
Oh yeah. I certainly see that.
Yeah. But that's because it's easier for me to crawl into that headspace. It's easier for me to crawl into what's my subconscious through a more psychedelic stance. And I think that speaks to a lot of different people,
Right.
Like being able to look at it, it sort of allows them to go inside of themselves. And that's what's important to me too.
Is that why you like David Lynch as much as you do? Have you been watching The Return?
No. I mean, I've seen up to the weird episode where the creature essentially escapes out of the cage, and that's about it. That's as far as I go with the explosion and of like the nuclear bomb, where all things meet at one point. I love David Lynch. I think he's incredible. But that's as far as I got, and then I was like, cool. Like I can take this and pick it back up again if I want to. But that right there was exactly what I needed at the time.
It was enough for you, I guess, at the time.
Yeah. Because I mean, David Lynch has sort of like influenced my adult approach to things, and it's hard to say, that I don't have reference points of all of everything that's ever been interesting to me in everything that I've made. Like I can't say that all of it is or that any one thing isn't a influence on a piece. It's just I take in stimuli and I place it inside of me, and then, as I said before, I spill out that. And a lot of times with my pieces, with my approach, sometimes I will place little objects or imagery that are gifts to other people, to my friends and my family, and gifts to the memory of a situation. And it'll all be inside of a multifaceted, usually high density, interconnected piece is usually my approach these days to art. So I don't know. There was this
that
one
sounds
time.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like the only way to do it is what I would.
Yeah.
To be more specific about it. Yeah.
So so basically I think about the interconnectedness of all things that spark my interest and that are part of me. And I try and use the negative space and positive space of each object, and in sort of like a Escher-esque format, generally with acrylic paintings and ballpoint pen drawings. I try to fill in this space, and that's what I teach about drawing is the art of filling in space. But yeah, I think I try and it becomes super saturated. It becomes sometimes it becomes sort of biomorphic in ways. And the space, the light source, let's say, is non-existent. It's everywhere. It's in different spaces. I try to manipulate it in such a way that like you can go deep into the depths of something that could possibly be on the surface. And then whatever's behind sometimes can be brought up front, and sort of play with this idea that essentially you're almost combing through or swimming through the ideas.
Yeah.
That's how I'm doing it now.
As we speak, that's your current project.
Yeah,
if you had to,
that's my current process essentially. And but I've been actually straying away from representational pieces.
Okay.
I'll show you an example.
Abstraction.
Yeah, I'm starting to not just abstraction, but non-representational. This has representational elements. I've been doing drawings. I'm showing Mitch here some drawings on postcards that I do at Blue Mountain Pizza.
Oh, excellent.
And this is some of the drawings that I've made. And you can see here that there's a surreal element, and that's sort of like, there is no, you can see what I mean when I'm talking about light, that there is no light.
Okay.
There's no particular light source. It's everywhere. Does that make sense?
I mean, does that make sense to me?
Yeah.
I mean, I can never see it the way you see it.
Right.
But I understand it intellectually, I have to say.
Yeah. So again, see, this is an abstract piece. It's non-representational. But I'm when I show people my pieces, I'm not interested in telling them what it means for me. I'm more interested in what they feel about it. But when I'm doing it, of course it's more about the way I feel, you know. So all of these, this one, you know, there's no right way to hold these. There's no right way to frame them. Each one of my current pieces.
You mean physically
can be moved.
Oh yeah, they're not meant to be side up or
exactly. And that, because it's more interesting to me to have a piece able to be changed over time, because otherwise things could become boring for me. They become mundane when I see them the same way every day. So that's what my challenge is for myself, is to create pieces that can be manipulated and moved in whatever way and become something new again. That's my challenge for myself.
Yeah. John, that's excellent.
Yeah.
It was really great having you on my show talking about all this. It's very important.
Thanks.
And I hate saying goodbye, but everything comes to an end. As you said at the beginning of the show, some of your art is finite.
Yeah, that's true.
But some of it's infinite, right?
Yeah.
Maybe next show we could talk about the infinite more. But
yeah, I would love that. I would love to come to do another one.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. But for now, we're going to say goodbye and
cool.
And thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
That's excellent. Mitch.